Good morning, 7th grade. I hope everybody had a happy Easter. I want to go over a few things with you before we get into our lesson today. Let's see, tests. I've graded the tests from last week or prior to spring break. You should see those grades in Gradebook Wizard. Overall, they were good. Still missing some tests from some people. We'll be trying to contact y'all soon, but you need to get those in. This week, Thursday is going to be your review day. For 7th grade, the Zoom review will be at 11 o'clock Thursday morning. I'll get you the Zoom code. It should be the same code, I think, as last time, but I'll let y'all know that for sure. Friday will be the test, so be ready to take your test on Friday and get it back to me. So we'll go over the sections today. And then you'll have an assignment of a paper that will be due the following Friday or the following Sunday, the 26th, that will be due. You need to get it back to me by then. Okay, and it'll be out of the section we covered this week. Once again, same format for y'all too. Just you can pick any person, battle, situation, out of what we're studying. I'll leave it up to you. You know the length. Make sure you have your two sources and you put your two sources on there, please. We're moving on to Chapter 17, World War I. We're a little behind, and I want to make sure we get through World War II at least before we get to the end of the school year. One other thing that I do mention in there, as a reminder, I believe I showed it to y'all last year, but a good video, I think, for y'all's ages to handle that you can go YouTube it, and you can watch the movie, is The Lost Battalion. So that'd be an interesting little thing to study while we're doing World War II over the next couple of weeks. All right. Moving on, the build-up to World War I, the Seeds of War section in Chapter 17. Since the mid-1800s, rivalries had been building up between European countries as they tried to expand their global empires. We talked about imperialism, the age of imperialism, in particular the years 1800 to 1914. We talked about those rivalries it was building. So these rivalries are one of the contributing factors to what ultimately happens with World War I. Also adding to the tension was the spirit of nationalism. We talked about that term in our previous sections, but that's pride in one's own nation and a desire for independence. And nationalism, we had studied the unification of Germany, of Italy. It was also nationalism. That sentiment was nationalist sentiment was growing in France. In Austria-Hungary, nationalism was creating probably the most violent tensions in Europe. In the Empire, Slavic people were attracted to Pan-Slavism, and that term is in your notes. It's the idea that Slavs had a historic mission to develop their culture and unite into an empire of their own. So Slavic nationalists in neighboring Serbia supported the Slavs in Austria-Hungary. And this is going to become important in terms of setting off World War I. But Austria-Hungary was alarmed by Serbian activities in the Balkans in that area. And as the tensions grew, so did militarism. Okay? And militarism is the glorification of war in the military. And obviously, that's a term in your notes, by the way. And obviously, as we're looking at this, that we've been studying the unification of countries, nationalism, imperialism, that these rivalries are building. And part of these rivalries is people concerned either they're going to grow their military and strengthen it, either so they can protect themselves from being conquered from a rival, or so they can grow the military so they can look to expand territory by force or conquer other territories. So this becomes, in essence, an arms race in the late 19th century into the 20th century. By 1870 or after 1870, all the European powers except Great Britain adopted a conscription which is the compulsory call-up of civilians for military service and universal military training. That's in term. It's a draft. It's a military draft. So that's all the European powers with the exception of Great Britain. And this is, of course, 40 plus years away from the start of World War I. But so you can see what they're already thinking. A lot of these countries are already thinking in terms of military buildup, what they're trying to get prepared for. And then you'll need to know the part about the only one that didn't was Great Britain. Alliances become very critical in this. The alliance system's a defense agreement among nations. Okay, y'all understand that term, and making a deal with another person can be an alliance or alliance of nations. And you make these alliances saying, well, if you'll help me do this, I'll help you do that. Well, in this case, a lot of it came down to, if I'm attacked, you have to come in and back me, and vice versa. The Triple Alliance was an alliance between Austria, Germany, and Italy, who was the last to join it in 1882. So this was still years prior to World War I. You'll need to know those three countries are the Triple Alliance. The other three major players in this were France, Russia, and Great Britain. They were the Triple Entente. You'll need to know that. I have that listed in your notes. And an entente is a friendly understanding between two nations that lacks the binding authority of an alliance. So these are all things you'll need to know. But you can see how these setups, especially given the time period now, sort of sets it up for if one country gets drug into something, it's going to pull a lot of countries into something, hence a world war. Section 2 in there, the spark. Until 1914, many Europeans did not believe there would be a major war, despite major military buildups. They kept thinking we won't get into any major type conflict. The continent of Europe hadn't had, they certainly had conflict, but not major wars since Napoleon's time. So that was 100 years prior to World War I. They may have thought that, hey, our military is so strong, theirs is so strong, we don't really want to get into it. But that was kind of a belief amongst a lot of people in Europe at the time. Turned out that was, of course, wishful thinking. June 28, 1914, Archduke Francis Ferdinand, who was the nephew and heir to the Austro-Hungarian Emperor Francis Joseph, visited Sarajevo. And Sarajevo is the capital of Bosnia-Herzegovina. So you'll need to know that. But he's making a visit there. And while the Archduke and his wife Sophie began to ride through the streets in an open car, there are 7 young assassins that had taken up positions along the route. And they were members of the Black Hand or Union of Death. I have those terms in your notes. And they were a secret nationalist group based in Serbia. What occurred there is there was an initial assassination attempt on them by throwing a bomb at the car, and that failed. That wound up failing to kill them. So after surviving an initial attack, as they're going along later on along their route, the luck kind of ran out. Driver took a wrong turn. There was ultimately lack of communication amongst the drivers because of some of the mayhem from the attempted assassination earlier. So they weren't all on the same page in terms of the route and where they needed to go. But unfortunately, as the car took a wrong turn and came to a stop, they actually came to a stop right by where one of the assassins were. 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip was standing there. He steps up onto the running board of the vehicle, takes out a gun, and he winds up killing the Archduke and his wife. Although later on he claimed he was trying to kill someone else that was in the car besides Sophie, the wife. But he winds up shooting them both. the Archduke is recorded basically is his wife laying there. He doesn't die immediately, but he's essentially begging his wife, not to die. So you can see it was a pretty gruesome thing. He told one of the aides in the car as they're rushing him off, it's nothing. He might have been shocked, may have thought that the wound wasn't that serious, but it was, and he winds up dying a little bit later. So this assassination really becomes the spark into triggering World War I. Austrian-Hungarian leaders held the Serbians responsible for this. And the Germans kind of backed the Austrian-Hungarians with this idea that they would support them. So from there, German Emperor William II, we've talked about him, assured Austria-Hungary that they would give them its full support to any actions they might take against Serbia. And remember, we talk about alliances that have been formed and forged between all these different countries, and how this is ultimately going to work in terms of getting them into war and having a declaration of war. So we're going to talk about that in the next segment here, but we'll stop at that point today. We'll finish that out, the rest of that tomorrow, which will get through the declaration of war, mobilizations. You'll see how some of the other countries get drug into this, and some of the early battles of World War I, and then that's where we'll stop for these sections. And then once again, we will be on review Thursday, tests on Friday. So be thinking of any questions that you may have or anything in the notes, and once you're reading over that you don't understand. All right, see you then.